Yeah.
Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take a slightly different point of view to my colleague Clayton Cosgrove, although there was a very harmonious committee that considered this bill. The one point I would question a little is his praise for the Minister and the Chair and the advice that he was given. I honestly believe that ministers have a responsibility themselves for the legislation they put forward to this House. And we are here this evening debating legislation that has been proven to be inadequate and not sufficient to the purpose it was originally created. Here we are passing through the House a bill which does very little indeed. The changes in this bill that are going through could easily have been rolled into an omnibus bill, and hundreds of thousands, I suspect, of dollars of taxpayer money could have been avoided being spent by paying all of us and all of our staff here to be here in the evening debating a bill that virtually does absolutely little of any value. We're happy that it does little, in fact, for the one reason that it was likely to do harm. That's where we got to. That's where the back of the envelope calculations that my colleague, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove, got to, that it may well indeed do harm. But ultimately, we don't know. We do not know, because the analysis was not done in a way that could give us the confidence to know whether this was a good thing we were doing or a bad thing. The small changes and tweaks which are going through in the bill we do support, so we do end up on balance supporting it. I would be interested in the Minister and the Chair giving us a little bit of a history of how he came to put this legislation forward, because the story I've heard and what came out in the committee was that this was ultimately the result of a promise that John Key had made when he was out kayaking. I can't remember whether it was Kevin Rudd or somebody else, that they would try to unify the arrangements in New Zealand and Australia, which on the surface seems like a sensible thing to do. And if the Minister could give us the reasoning behind it, and the reasoning he's now reached as to why we should be doing exactly the opposite, if he could slip on his flip-flops and get up and explain to us how he came from one position to the extreme opposite, maybe with a slight Australian twang for some amusement along the way, that would probably be doing a public service, because at least we would be entertaining the public, but also we might learn what he hopes the bill will now achieve, because I think that is important to understand why we're here, why we are passing this legislation, and why this couldn't have been done through an omnibus bill process, whether in fact there is another process that has been considered for the bill from here on through the House. And that may be something we'd have to take technical advice on, but it would save the House some time. We could get on with what would be hopefully more important legislation in the wider interests of the country. The one thing I will say is that this bill is emblematic of the government's wider efforts. It is a government that has said it wants to get exports up to 40% of GDP, and that requires us diversifying our... Mr.
Order.
Chair, I know
Order.
I
apologise for interrupting the member, but I have let him go now for about 3 minutes, and I want to remind him that we are on the committee stages of the bill. The bill has been accepted in its current form and principle, and all we're trying to do is to make sure that the detail actually is consistent with the principle as accepted at the second reading. So his speech was probably marginal for a second reading one, but it's certainly not good for the committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm still on my feet, Mr. Cosgrove. So what I am going to ask the member to do now is to stick to the detail of the bill.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
A point of order, Clayton Cosgrove.
Without wishing to, I don't wish to challenge you.
Well, you better not be.
I know you too well to do that, sir, in a lot of ways. But one thing I would say, sir, about the member's speech, and it is a very unusual situation that we faced in the committee, sir, in that a proposition was put forward by the government and then reversed. And there was an extreme amount of conjecture around that, some extremely flimsy analysis around it, and part of, as you say, to check the accuracy or the detail on the committee stage is to traverse those issues.
I've heard enough. Dr. David Clark.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, let me read from Part 6. The purpose of this part is to regulate the provision of patent attorney services by giving effect to the joint registration regime in accordance with the arrangement. Now, that is precisely the issue. Does this bill really give effect to a joint registration regime in the way that it was intended when the bill was lodged with the House? I don't think it does anymore, Mr. Chair. That is what I am arguing. I think that the bill has changed in such a fashion that I am questioning whether it really achieves the original purpose put forward by the Minister, and I would appreciate his response on that.